there are an estimated 7 billion people inhabiting planet Earth today. Of those 7 billion people, according to the United States Census, there are an estimated 340 to 350 million individuals that live in the geographic area of the United States. Considering that fact, imagine the early days before the Industrial Revolution and before the nitrogen, aka fertilizer, was put into the soil. The population was a lot smaller. How many individuals can you name off the top of your head from history? Now, I am a historian myself. I read a lot of historical books, historical literature. That's sort of my thing. Some people, they like sports. Some people, they like movies. I like history. That's my thing. As a historian, I can name less than 30 people. If you put the entire population of New York, which is 8 million people, into a room, how many of those individuals do you think are going to be remembered? Less than 1% of 1%, right? Where am I going with this? The point I am trying to reiterate is that chances are you are probably not special. No matter how many times your guidance counselor, your teacher, Barney, or the bullshit occupants in authority have told you that. Most people view their world in the lens through narrative. Like I stated in my video about George Washington, history is a lie. History is presented in the context of narrative. Just like any great film, the current events that are presented through the media, any great novel, and so on and so forth. It is presented as a hero going through a great struggle. And in most struggles, it is man versus an antagonist. You do, in rare occasions, have man versus himself, so on and so forth. But in most cases, it is man versus some antagonist that is blocking himself to reaching a goal. And so what happens? People view themselves because they don't want to admit that they're average. That most likely they're going to get married, have kids, have a good life, and if they're lucky, live to 75 with their grandkids and their spouse by their side. Die, be remembered by their family, and in 100 years from now, be in the dust, forgotten. It is what it is. That's how I'm going to be, but I understand that, and I am 100% okay with that. I'm not worried about that. But most people don't want to admit that. So they arbitrarily create themselves into two classes. There are, of course, many particular boxes that people would put themselves into, but most of them, they fit within one or the other. The first one would be the victim mentality. They think their life is going to be terrible. They think their life is going to be bad. And as a result, it is. Your thoughts form reality. When you view everything in a negative light, not only does it ruin your immune system, but what you're looking for is going to be what you're going to find. As you look for negative things, you're going to have negative outcomes. You hear all the time, oh, I'm going to be a cat lady. I'm never going to get a husband. I'm never going to achieve my financial dreams. They believe that. And then any time they have to deal with suffering, they view that suffering as being only unique to them. Every individual is suffering. I don't care if you're president of the United States, if you're living in the streets of California. It is just a fact of life that every human being is going to suffer. Suffering does not make you virtuous. Just because you suffer more than somebody else in a particular way doesn't mean you're better than them. It's about what are you going to do to minimize that suffering or to deal with that suffering. There's many ways of doing that. Drugs, alcohol, religion, relationships, things like that. People find ways to deal with those things arbitrarily. That's my question. When somebody says, I've suffered so much, my question is, what are you going to do to change that? Or how are you going to deal with that suffering and make it less potent in your life, either now or in the future? Anytime they deal with pain, anytime they are rejected for a job or a girl, anytime they are losing money in investments, so on and so forth, they give up. And they just confirm their negative thought patterns as that is society, that is racist, sexist, homophobic, bigoted, every ism that you can attach to it as justification for their failure. They view their entire life as suffering, and because they suffer, they're virtuous. Some people view that as they're going to suffer on earth, and then when they die, they're going to heaven, and they're going to see their grandfather, their turtle that died in the 5th grade, and so on and so forth. Some people view that as they're going to be an activist. They're going to hold signs, scream at individuals they perceive to be less virtuous than them, so on and so forth. People have different ways of dealing with that, but they assume their entire life is going to be full of trials, tribulations, negativity. It is not their fault. They are not accountable for their actions, and as a result, they are not accountable for their outcome. It is their job to deal with that in whatever way. Some people, they become social justice warriors. They go and scream and talk about how if it wasn't for white males, then they would be better off, because white males hold all the power. But the truth is, if it wasn't for white males, they probably wouldn't be here, most of these people, because white males, Rudolf Diesel that invented the diesel engine, which is what fuels our economy, cultivates food, distributes the resources through the trucks. The diesel engine, it was created by Rudolf Diesel, a white male. The fertilizer that puts nitrogen in the atmosphere was created by Fritz Haber, who was a Caucasian Jew. So chances are it's actually the opposite. If it wasn't for white males, they probably would not exist, because our population used to be a lot smaller. But of course, when you think in that lens, when you view things in that premise, you're historically, economically, and overall an ignorant person. Secondly, the other microcosm they view themselves, the other lens. And this has two wings to the same bird, as a great triumphant hero who is ordained by God, like Cyrus the Great was, like Daniel was, to liberate, to become great, to achieve amazing feats. It is their job to take on the system, to become this magnanimous, transforming, revolutionary figure. They are ordained by God to do so. And sometimes it takes that. I understand that. Individuals like Patton he thought legitimately that he was a reincarnation from some of the great generals like Alexander the Great of the past. But Patton was crazy as fuck. He was an anomaly, and he was definitely what you would call novelty. Less than 1% of 1% of people that have ever lived on this earth possess those capabilities and are crazy enough to pursue some of those feats. Other people view themselves through the prism of a tragic hero. They think they are going to, it's sort of in the classical sense, the classical tragic hero sense. A person who had a story similar to this would be Alexander Hamilton. He at once achieved the great feats of power. He served in the Revolutionary War. He ended up becoming the first Secretary of the Treasury that built the current commerce and commercial United States system. Then he ended up going on to a duel, and he got killed. Very young for the time of his death, even in the time period of those days when the standard of living was lower and the age of living was lower. He was your classic Greek tragic hero. Same thing with Martin Luther King or John Kennedy. People think they're going to be this great hero that fight against the system, that it is their job to take on the system, and then they end up getting shot by a bullet, dying in a glorious blaze of fire. My view is I'm going to live my life, make money in the stock market, make money in business, exercise at the gym, get stronger, have sex, maybe meet a woman someday, I don't know. But have sex, enjoy women for what they are, don't take life too seriously, and die and then be buried underground. 100 years from now, I'll be forgotten. This video might not even exist. It is what it is, but I'll be dead. So I never got this notion, why should I care what people think of me when I'm dead? I'm not going to know what they're saying anyway. I'm not going to know what they're thinking anyway. All of the elements in your body come from the earth. You have nitrogen. You have carbon, which is the building blocks of life. All of these elements are in you. And when you die, you go back into the earth, and those elements go back into the earth. It is just the cycle. Everything in the universe that we need to sustain life is abundant. Water, the water cycle, the nitrogen cycle, the carbon cycle. And then when you die, those elements go back into the earth's crust, and they are used for other purposes. We are created from stardust. It is what it is. But that's the way you got to view things. Don't view yourself as this great classic hero or this victim that no matter what they do, they will never succeed. Make your glass normal. Don't make it half empty. Don't make it half full. See it for what it is, enjoy it for what it is, and be realistic for what it is. That's why people become so depressed these days, because when they don't see themselves becoming this great successful individual like they thought, because they could regurgitate information in school, or because they knew how to bounce a ball, but they weren't 6'10" and they were white, so they couldn't make it to the NBA, they become depressed because they think it is their birthright. It is owed to them to make it to the top. Same thing with a lot of people with relationships. They think they're going to meet that special person God created for them. And when they don't, they become depressed. I thought those things at one time. That's why you got to go through the pain. When you realize the truth, you got to adjust. Human beings have been able to live on the earth, while 99.9% of species that have ever walked the earth have died. That's because human beings are creatures of adaptation. You got to adapt to the current economic system, the current political system, the current societal paradigm, where women now are gaining more of the powers in the courts, in politics, and media. You've got to adjust, pick what you think would be best to thrive in this society, and instead of bitching or trying to take on the entire system in a blaze of glory, adjust your life accordingly, do what you got to do, find your purpose in life, and then go back into the earth. Everybody needs a purpose, but having a purpose isn't the same thing as taking on the entire system or being a perpetual victim. If you're a doctor, your purpose is to cure diseases, save lives. If you're a business owner, your job is to create a good or a service. Invest that money back in your community, treat your workers good, give them a way to support their families. Just find a purpose, pursue that purpose. Enjoy those around you. Accept life for what it is. I mean, this is simple shit, but it's true. I know it is difficult to say, I'm going to be normal. I'm going to be average. I know that's a hard thing to do, but out of 7 billion people, out of 340 million, out of 8 million, chances that you're going to be remembered in 100 years is less than 1% of that.